Welcome everybody to our final IDF event for 2021. You'll see that there is a link in the chat that will take you to our Miro board. If you can please just take your time to fill in, to add a comment onto our tree. You can simply click on this icon over here where you click, you'll be able to then add a comment over here and just provide certain details such as your name, the location, your role, and your specific learning goal. In that way, we'll be able to curate content for our sessions for next year that are directly in line with things that you'd like to learn. For those of you who don't have any background on the Interaction Design Foundation, let me give you a brief overview. So IDF was established in Denmark in 2002. It's based on the Scandinavian education system, and their mission was basically to change the way people learn design by providing low cost and quality education and to create accessible and affordable Ivy League education for all. If we look at the numbers, there are more than 94,000 graduates and counting, 810 enterprise customers, 150 design experts who are currently creating the learning material. Interaction Design Design Foundation runs more than 475 local groups in 84 countries globally. From a South African perspective, we're #1 in South Africa for our Joburg group. It's #2 in Africa and #24 worldwide. As the world's leading design school, IDF has various options for your learning experience, from online bootcamps, masterclasses, and online design courses as well. The certificates that you will get from IDF are trusted by industry leaders such as Adobe and IBM, to name a few. And the course, we also have the largest authoritative open source UX design literature with such authors such as Don Norman. So let's get on with this evening. Let me give you an overview. So firstly, this evening we'll have Llewellyn, who will be going through AI principles in this session this evening, and next year in 2021 we'll then go over part 2, which will cover AI's influence on UX and UX influence on AI. So this evening, the core focus is principles. So to give you some background on our speaker, Llewellyn is a student software developer, designer, founder, and chairperson for AISS. So basically a unicorn. He aims to introduce AI literacy and application to emerging industries. He's been designing since a young age and believes that technological advancements can not only augment our current operations, but also serves as a canvas for a sustainable future. He has gained valuable experience working as a software developer for an Australian mining technology company known as Resolution Systems. He's also enjoying being one of 50 students globally selected to be part of Astronova School and Network, co-founded by Elon Musk. As the founder and chairperson of both the Artificial Intelligence Student Society and Space Exploration Student Society at the University of Victoria, he's bringing relevant talks, podcasts, projects, competitions, and tutorials to his members. He's also expanding his initiative to other South African universities and helping with several startup software businesses. If you want to find out more about AISS as well, you can find the various links on Instagram and various social media under tux_AISS. And now over to our speaker.
Hi, Chase. Thank you for that introduction. I just want to confirm, can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Awesome. Okay, so let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, can you guys see?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Awesome. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really honored to give a talk here at the IDF. It's really a topic that really fascinates me, and it's really shaping the future. And what we're going to do is, we went through the talk and we just discovered that there's so much to actually discuss. So we're breaking this talk into 2 parts. So for today, we're going to discuss artificial intelligence and also the design process with regards to AI and the influence that UX have on AI and AI on UX and how you actually design for AI. So the main reason why I'm here today is because this is a buzzword. And as I said, this is really exciting. It's the future. And this is the main reason why the presentation got requested. Everybody wants to know what is happening with AI, how to start and what can they expect. So I've categorized 3 main topics to discuss in order to provide the best information for a designer, the best information I could possibly find. So the first one is, which influence does AI have on the creative industry and its UX designers? So it's basically the impact that it has today. And then secondly, how does designing for AI work? And what are the most important design principles? And this topic is really the technical one for the designers to understand how to tackle designing for artificial intelligence. What should you know? What principles should you follow? And then this topic will be discussed in part 2, but it's how can user experience actively shape the era of AI and machine learning? So that's basically the future, tomorrow's impact. So there are a couple of perspectives when it comes to AI, and I'm sure that all of you have heard them, seen videos. It's really, there's not a uniform opinion globally. So I've thought I'll just give you guys an example of a very positive view of the future of AI. So it's Amit Ray, the pioneer of compassionate AI movement, and it reads, the coming era of artificial intelligence will not be the era of war, but be the era of deep compassion, non-violence, and love. So it's very, very positive, and it's very, it's auspicious. So the more realistic type of view is from Elon Musk, technology entrepreneur and investor. And it reads, AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a goal and humanity just happens to come in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course, without even thinking about it, no hard feelings. Okay, and then we get Mr. Stephen Hawking. The development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. It could take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded. So yeah, that's not very positive. And it's basically an illustration of the lack of understanding really of what we are going through at the moment and where we are heading with artificial intelligence. We don't really know what to expect. So this is the 4th industrial revolution, and we are a bit unsure where we're going. So for this talk, we're going to discuss what is artificial intelligence currently. And it's very simply put, it's a tool. That's basically what it is. And it's a tool that we use and that we're developing, and it's a smart tool, but it's simply just a tool. And what it's not is this. It's not robots killing us. It's not taking over factory workers. It's not explosions. It's really purely a tool. So in order to simplify what AI is it's the categorization for classification of data, and it's being done with a collection of statistical models. So lots and lots of data which needs to be figured out is the classification. And the statistical models is just pure math to assist with the allocation of these data points and to determine what they represent. It's actually very simple. Now, also what I actually want to say with regard to this, so this statistical models, it's called machine learning. So all of these models collectively is called machine learning, and we can further categorize machine learning into 2 sub categories. So the first one is supervised learning, and the second one is unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning is basically when you have your AI and it trains itself. You know, it doesn't need a human to actually learn from its mistakes. And supervised learning, a nice way to actually think about it is like training a baby to walk. It needs supervision, it needs assistance. And those are mainly the two categories of machine learning. There is obviously a lot more, but for the purposes of this presentation, we are not going to spend hours and hours discussing all categories of AI and machine learning. So this is my favorite way to visualize AI in action. It's called gradient descent. And just a bit more about gradient descent. It's a machine learning algorithm that operates iteratively to find the optimal values for its parameters. It takes into account user-defined learning rate and initial parameter values. So gradient descent is an optimization algorithm used for minimizing the cost function in various machine learning algorithms. It is basically used for updating the parameters of the learning model, but if the number of training examples is large, then batch gradient descent is computationally very, very expensive. So the reason why this image that I'm showing you guys and gradient descent is a nice way to visualize what artificial intelligence really is because you can think of AI as being a landscape designer, all right, but only on a macro scale. So we can imagine that the consolidation of all these gradients and vectors serve as a mountain range, which will guide where water could flow. So you can only imagine now that this gradient that you're seeing is a mountain range, and you're going to pour water on it. So what's going to happen? It's going to find a resting place. And the water itself would be the input data, and the resting place would be the output, or rather the prediction of the AI. So ultimately, it depends on where the water is released in order to predict where the water would find its resting place. And again, the resting place is the prediction. However, AI is a learning algorithm, right? So you might wonder where the learning would be taking place. So just like mountains and nature, if there's a lot of water weight being pulled to the bottom of the valley over and over and over, eventually it would form a root. If any water is being released near that root, it would inevitably flow to the root. So the most important part of this idea or concept is the resting place, because that would be the output or prediction we desire to know. And here's a nice GIF to actually illustrate this concept. So those black dots would represent the water being released or the input data, and then it flows to its resting place. And that would be the prediction that we find. So lots and lots of data needs to be figured out that we call classification, and that can be thought of as the water's root being formed or discovered. Okay, so this is a very, very simplified way of thinking about AI and to visualize the principles. However, it is a very effective way to have a better understanding of what AI actually is. It's really just a map of input data that is figuring out the patterns of the output data. And it makes sense if you visualize it like this. So if we summarize what we've just said in the AI process, okay, as a summary, we have our input data, we have our features, we have our labels, and then it's training and making predictions. So the input data you can think of as the water atoms, okay? And the features is basically when you go to a database, it would be the columns that allow us to predict the data. And if we go to our visualization, it would be the untouched grid, which would be formed and manipulated. So the labels are the columns that we want to predict. What would the resting place actually represent? And making predictions is where the AI actually operates. And this is actually quite funny because it serves as a black box. We don't really know why and how the patterns are being formed. We don't really understand that too much. So the training is discovering the rules. AI is discovering the rules. We are not involved in this process, okay? And it's allowing lots and lots of water to flow down the mountain. If we go back to our visualization, the training of our data set is allowing lots of water to flow down that mountain and to make its routes in order to know where to flow and what to predict, all right? And the making of predictions is adding new data in order to make those predictions. Okay, so if we can just take a step back and we go back to this visualization, we have our input data, which is basically the black dots, and then we have our features, which would kind of be the grid, and then we have our labels, which will tell us what the resting place would represent, and then that would be our prediction. So that's a very simplified way of thinking about AI, but it's effective to understand and initiate your learning curve. So if we take that concept and we just pull it through to databases. So if we understand AI now a bit better, but now we actually just want to know a bit more about how it actually works in a database. And I won't spend too much time on this because it is very technical, but you can just imagine that the blue part is the data that we have, okay? And we want to eventually predict the price, because that takes a lot of time. We have to pay 300 employees to figure out what this price would be. So it would save so much time to actually just have AI to predict it. So what we do is we use these features, all these columns, and we use these features to predict this label, all right? And then we train it. So then we say, take all of these values into account and figure out all by yourself how these prices came to be, all right? And then once we give you this new data, the orange, we are not giving you the price, and we want you to actually predict it. And that's what the AI will do with a certain level of accuracy. So that's just if we go a bit into databases. So now that we're done with the technical stuff of AI and basically how it works, I hope that you have a better understanding about what it is. So now for the designer, the designer in you, it's important to understand the difference between automation and artificial intelligence, right? So automation is when everything is defined. The input is defined and the output is predictable. And our AI, as we just saw, it's not really that. We have our input data, but it's in order to find the pattern for the output data, all right? So the automation, a very good example of automation is Airbnb. So they are truly paving the way by pioneering an automated UX design process. So in their article, Sketching Interfaces by Benjamin Wilkins and John Gould, they demonstrate how they produce low fidelity sketches and high fidelity visual mockups in real time, all right? So they use specialized camera equipment and software, of course. Airbnb's visual design team inevitably finesses the final results as necessary, but the level of design and speed they've achieved is ideal for creating prototypes to get quick feedback and validation. So what Airbnb does is they automated their way to find high fidelity mockups, all right? And the important thing here is that the designer is not the user. Here the user is the designer. So why this is a good example of automation is because the input is always a wireframe and the output is always a high fidelity mockup, if that makes sense. So it's always the same. It's the same story over and over again. You're just automating it, all right? Now, that's automation. If we go to artificial intelligence, that's a bit different. And a very good example of artificial intelligence is YouTube. That's the best example I could find so that everybody can hopefully relate to it. But it's all users have the same type of input, okay? which is watching videos. So all these users are watching videos, and we want to predict what the follow-up video should be. Okay, so we can't really automate that. But now we need to figure out how to do that. We know that we have 200,000 users, hypothetically, who are all watching videos. And we want to tell all of these 200,000 users what the next video should be that they should watch. Now, if we just look at the numbers, if 200,000 users watched exactly the same video, and we want to predict what the next suggested video should be, in the case where all 200,000 users watched a unique follow-up video, that will lead to a 40 trillion nodal network. It's definitely impossible to automate that. At least if you want good user experience, it's going to take forever. So it's really difficult to do that. So what AI does is AI takes each user's input, which is the videos watched, and remembers them. And then based on that complex network, it can provide a unique output or suggestion. So that's artificial intelligence. It's basically every user is getting a map, like we just illustrated that mountain range. So every user will have some sort of map that will guide the data, where to flow, and what should be the next suggested video, if that makes sense. So it's very important to be able to understand the difference between automation and artificial intelligence. All right, so now for the fun part. This is, how does designing for AI work, and what are the most important design principles? Okay, this is my favorite part of the talk because it really goes into the principles of how to design for AI. So Joel van Bodegraven, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Chris Duffy, they said, as a creative community, we are shaping AI. We are shaping what AI can become in the future, okay? And that's really exciting, but also, like, it sounds like a lot of responsibility for us designers when we think about what they mean with the sentence. So we are still at the beginning of the AI era, but AI is rapidly evolving. In order not to feel lost, there are a lot of AI design principles out there. Okay, so I have tried to select the most frequently mentioned principles from experts working in the industry. The principles are based on current AI developments and will probably adapt or change over the next couple of years or even months. But for today, these are the principles that we're going to discuss. It's differentiate AI content visually, explain how machines think, set the right expectations, find and handle weird edge cases, provide engineers with the right training data, user testing for AI products, and provide an opportunity to give feedback. Okay, so if we go to the first principle, differentiate AI content visually. So AI-generated content can prove extremely useful for people, but in some cases, these recommendations and predictions need greater accuracy. So AI algorithms have their own flaws, especially when they don't have enough data or feedback to learn from. So also when it comes to designing for AI, it is the most important thing to be aligned with the real human need. The user's role as well as the goal have to be clear. So I'll just repeat that. The user's role as well as the goal have to be very clear. This is to deliver good interaction concepts and to address user needs. It is all about the insights we have generated and will generate during the design process. So therefore, we should keep in mind that different users might prefer different things, especially when it comes to AI. So here's a very good example, and this is not an example to, don't think that the image really means anything. All that I want to illustrate here is that to have the UI really separate what AI generated so that the user can actually know that this is artificial intelligence, this is dynamic, it's just a suggestion, it's not a given, it's not an instruction, it's not a fact, we know this is AI. So we should let people know if an algorithm has generated a piece of content so they can decide for themselves whether to trust it or not. Thus reads the first principle of AI and UX. Okay, so now the next principle is explain how machines think. And this is also very important because artificial intelligence often looks like magic, and sometimes even the engineers have difficulty explaining how the machines learn and how they actually come up with something. So this doesn't mean that we should go into depth and really explain the technical stuff of AI, but we should give users hints about what the algorithm does or what data it uses. So not only designers, but also users have to deal with uncertainty and risk by interacting with this technology. So when there is a lack of control, we need to have a certain level of trust. For example, when it comes to storing our data in the cloud, the trust in machines can be influenced by factors like human characteristics, environmental characteristics, as well as technological characteristics. Okay, so apply to our example, it means that someone with a trusting character is more likely to trust the data storage in a cloud, and this is called e-trust. And this will be based on 4 kinds of components. It's communication, information, social, and cognitive trust. So communication trust is like network connections, where information trust is like believing the quality of the information, believing the quality of the experience, the quality, or not the quality of uncertainty, but just trusting that there is uncertainty. Also the social trust, and in a sense, this is like honesty in a relationship. Example for like social media. And then cognitive trust as the expected knowledge of reliability and competence. So a user really needs to feel that this AI is competent, or at least transparent enough to determine for themselves whether this machine is competent. All right, and a good old example comes from e-commerce. Okay, and this is a very classic example where we explain why we recommend certain products. Now, these recommendation engines were the first AI UX many people encountered many years ago, but it's really efficient. Reading there that customers who bought this item also bought. So it's really transparent. We know how this machine is thinking. And that's very important for great user experience. So the third principle is to set the right expectations, okay? And we can have a hypothetical example to illustrate this. We can take a Tesla car or a Tesla accident, okay, where the driver probably trusted the autopilot too much and then caused an accident regardless of the cues and sounds produced by the Tesla as warnings. So explainability is a crucial principle to understand the AI decision-making process and setting the right expectations. The user should always know how the system came to this conclusion or recommendation. Always, it's very important that the user understand that process, but how can we actually achieve this? So first, we have the user should be able to ask questions, okay, regarding the decisions the AI has made, okay? And second, the reasons behind the system recommendation should be reviewable, especially when there is highly sensitive personal data in use. And thirdly, in case the users or team does not have full access to it, they should still know the intent of the AI and its level of transparency. Okay, so this is how you set the right expectations. The user needs to be able to question it, it needs to be reviewable, and also the level of transparency and intent of the AI. Now, this is basically just a dashboard or just a visualization to illustrate the Tesla UI. And I actually also want to mention another example. So some chatbots use messages to clarify the level of advancement. And this is actually also a very good tool to explain to users what to expect, all right? So in this case, we try to lower the expectations with a nice copy and a kind character for the bot. So the more playful the bot looks, the lower the expectations of the users are, and the more open-minded the user will actually be when they use the chatbot. All right, and now for the fourth principle, which is find and handle weird edge cases. Now, this is also a very important principle, really for great user experience, because I believe most people will be actually able to relate most to this slide or this principle, because AI can generate content and take actions no one had thought of before. And for such unpredictable cases, we have to spend more time testing the products and finding weird, funny, or even disturbing or unpleasant edge cases. Okay, so many funny and rude chatbot examples about where the bot didn't understand the context or people gave them simple but unexpected commands. An example of that is actually Cortana from Microsoft. So when you ask Cortana, who's your daddy, it will respond with Bill Gates. So that's a great user experience when the user is actually interacting with the AI. And it's a weird edge case, like the bot was obviously, Cortana was not designed to answer who's your daddy, but because it did account for that weird edge case, the user experience is a lot better. So these are, I want to show you guys some examples. So yeah, this is examples of AI misinterpreting. And if we actually just take a look at the one on the left, the AI is saying, bonjour, how would you describe the term bot to your grandma? And then the user responds with, my grandma is dead. And then the bot just says, all right, thank you for your feedback. So designers have to provide developers with information about user expectations, because then they can fine-tune the algorithms to prevent bad responses. In many cases, they play a trade-off between precision and recall. But the most important thing about these weird edge cases is having empathy. So as a designer, empathy is key to be a good designer, really, really. And the edge cases was not thought of properly, and therefore it's an unempathetic response. And that is what you want to avoid. And on the left, on the right, we can also just see another very annoying edge case. But yeah, it's basically just AI not understanding I meant. And then it just adds everything, and then you just have to start all over and getting annoyed. All right, so that was weird edge cases. Now the fifth principle is provide engineers with the right training data, okay? And this is very important for the development of the AI. So engineers will need training data, specifically well-defined outcomes for different inputs they can feed into the machine learning algorithm. So a real-world example of just how important this actually is that Google reportedly hires content specialists. And these experts these people are experts in the domain of the product, and they help build this training set. So Google actually hires people to make sure that this training data is correct and workable. So creating an AI product from the engineering side usually takes these three high-level steps. Okay, finding the best AI algorithm for your task, feeding the AI training data, and publishing the content, the product. So finding the best AI algorithm for your task, that is, as I said in the beginning, gradient descent. There are a lot of algorithms out there, and it's very important that you choose the correct one in order to make the accuracy of the AI higher. Now, feeding the AI training data. So this is the AI learns from this data and creates a model it will use in the live product, okay? And then publishing the product, it will use the model trained before doing certain things for the users. It might also collect new data for later use, retrain the model, and improve its own performance. Okay, So training data is very, very important in order to actually make the functionality of the AI good. Now, the sixth principle is user testing for AI products. And this is probably the strangest of the 7 principles, because we can't really apply default methods here. So testing the user experience of AI products can prove much more difficult than for regular apps. These apps mainly promise to provide personalized content, but you hardly can emulate that with some dummy stuff in a wireframe. So a very good method to actually test AI products is Wizard of Oz testing. And basically what Wizard of Oz testing is simply put, you have your test subject or your user, and you are emulating AI with another human being. So here on the left, you can see this man is acting as if it is the AI. And here on the right, you can see that the user is thinking that it's communicating with the AI. And then what they will do with this result is whenever the user actually experienced good communication or anything like that, that means that we should train our AI with this data. Okay, so we don't want to send a glitchy, non-functional AI to a user to kind of know that they are annoyed or they don't really have a good experience. We actually want to act as if we already have all the technology in order to know what the user is actually expecting and want. And then we can go and we can train our AI products in a better way. So the final principle is provide an opportunity to give feedback. So the user experience of AI products gets better and better if we feed more data into the machine learning algorithm. Okay, and I apologize for the quality of this picture, but it's a really good way to actually look at the movie recommendation system. So for each movie displayed, you can set if you like it or not. It collects vast amounts of training data for the algorithm, and the algorithm is just getting smarter and better. So also provide your users the opportunity to give feedback about the AI content. And that's very important. So on every screen where the app has made a recommendation or prediction, give the users the chance to give feedback easily and right away. It usually means one-tap feedback options displayed next to the AI content. All right, so that's it. That's the 7 principles that user experience designers should consider when actually designing with or for AI. And these are the principles most frequently mentioned and used nowadays, but it will most likely change over time. So just to reflect, we want to differentiate AI content visually, okay? We want to make it obvious for the user that this part of the screen is using AI, and then explain how machines think. So in this part of the screen, which is using AI, we understand how this AI is actually thinking, and then we set the right expectations, and then we find and handle weird edge cases. So this is a bit more in the back end, but you need to think of all the types of things that users will actually attack your AI with, because once you say there's AI in my product, people will assume that it's general intelligence and just test it really and find its limits. So providing a good edge case will increase the user experience. And then 5th is provide engineers with the right training data. And this is important just to keep your model functional and actually not training any biases or anything like that within it, and also the longevity of your AI product. Then 6 is user testing for AI products. And this is a very new kind of field, but a very good way to do that is Wizard of Oz testing. And then lastly, provide an opportunity to give feedback. And everybody knows that the more feedback you get, the better your product and the better your user experience will be. And that is it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share all of this. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Llewellyn. Let me share screens now. Okay, so thank you to everybody who took time out of their busy schedules to join us this evening. More than 50 had RSVP'd, 30 from our meetup page and 24 from our IDF from the IDF website, from the Johannesburg group page. Thank you also to our speaker Llewellyn, who has created this two-part presentation for us, and we're looking forward to the rest in 2021. Thank you also to David, Sheldon, and Heath for helping us with our video editing. And thank you to Melissa, who has helped us with a lot of the events this year. Melissa will be moving to another country, and anybody who is interested in being co-lead for Johannesburg chapter, please reach out on any of the social media channels from Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can just send a message from them. And then if anybody is looking to learn more with its user research, UI design, accessibility, or user experience design, you can go to the Interaction Design website and find out more. We'll also be sending out this document along with other resources, such as along with some extra links so that you can have access to all this information. Thank you again, everybody, and good night. So if you guys have any questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat, and we'll get back to you with answers in our second session. So I don't know if you guys have been sending, okay, I see a couple of stuff in the chat. Got some nice comments here for you, Llewellyn. Thank you so much. This has been so insightful. But if you guys have any questions, you can either put it in the chat, or feel free to just reach out on Meetup or any of our social media platforms. We kind of have run out of time. So yeah, bye everybody.
Cheers.